Thank you for coming so early in the morning. This is a talk on international sourcing and some of the issues that come up. A bit of background, Menlo Scientific's about 32 years old. We've been doing sourcing in Asia for about 30 years. And this is sort of 40 minutes worth of some of the stories, background, issues, and so on. Similar to a talk I gave at the AES, which is starting to do some product-oriented work. Focus of our discussion is working with OEM and ODM product development partners, product managers, and how to successfully bring products to market. OEM means original equipment manufacturer, somebody that starts from scratch. ODM means you might go there and look at a range of products that look close to what you want, and the last 10 or 20% are productized to your brand. Projects that we do range from designing from a clean sheet of paper to brands that are in a hurry and are looking for how to pick a global vendor and grab something off the shelf. And then we have some discussion in the talk of best practices of offshore manufacturing and the supply chain, design services, using engineering services, and off-the-shelf and semi-custom assemblies. If there's any questions, it would be good if you just break in rather than me babbling on for 45 minutes. Some vague idea of what we do is if you go to our website, you'll see there's nothing much in there for the last couple of years. Our clients are sensitive. We have a lot of stuff from 30 and 20 and 10 and 5 years ago. I can just say that recent projects in the last 3 months have included projects for Samsung, Panasonic, Apple, Qualcomm, Dolby Labs, Blue Ant Wireless, and a bunch of others. We're busy beavers, you know. Best practices, sourcing, vendor qualification, and evaluation. In our business, we usually work with a customer, get some idea of who the customer is, the quantities involved, the pricing and quality sensitivities. We do a short list, and then we take the client to Asia for a beauty contest, in which case we introduce the customer to a half dozen factories, review background information on each factory. We generally then perform vendor audits, and then after the factory selection, we help them implement additional process control and other customer requirements. We provide a summary of each vendor's attributes, capabilities, and limitations. And this would be, you know, what are unit prices in various volumes, our prior experience with each vendor, good and bad with other clients, the OEM's experience and with other customers outside of what we do with them, production volume capabilities and existing use capacity, and this ranges from quick ramp up to a big customer to how small a production run are they willing to do. Estimate the efforts and commitment of the vendor to project, which we'll discuss later, and trustworthiness of the vendor, which has many aspects, not just trusting the management. So here's one customer's wish list, because each customer has very different perspectives. We can provide some guidance. In the end, the customer pays the bill and they decide what they want. So the customer's wish list, this was a large laptop, smartphone manufacturer. Basically, it's a large fruit company. And the customers of OEM, ODM, how long have key customers similar to our client been with this factory? What customers have the factory lost and to which competitor? And is our client's current project the ODM's strength? So you may find a factory that's building power amps for pro sound companies, but they also say they can do Bluetooth. The question is, yes, they can, and they have some of that business. Would they be the right vendor for a Bluetooth company? Well, maybe not. We estimate the efforts and commitment of the vendor to the project. Some of these customers represent an enormous amount of business, but very little profit. Other customers require a lot of attention, but not much quantity, but it's a high markup. Is this fit the appetite of the factory and who the customer is? Does the factory management and the engineering group understand the new technology of the project? Do these groups see the business opportunity, and are they ready to make the investment and commitment and time and money to bring the project into production? If, let's say, the management's excited and they have the vision and engineering doesn't believe in this, you can have a problem later, especially if there's a bump in the road. Another client, they were a big fish, fast track, sometimes called big fish, fast track, big bang. Fast time to market for a large ramp-up customer. If somebody that builds smartphones may need 1 million speakers a day from start. And like some of these product introductions, 50 or 70 million smartphones are sold the opening day. And so the question is, how do you ramp up? What's the right company? We could have 2 companies that are highly skilled, but one of them is all automation and they can ramp up quickly, and the other one gets the same quality but through skilled workers. It's very hard to ramp up skilled workers. So for a really big customer, we evaluate each vendor for rapid prototyping support, the speed and number of days. For this type of customer, fast development timeline and designs are constantly changing. And then what's the estimated number of days from a preliminary CAD file to fully functioning samples arriving in the U.S. offices? Past prototyping skills, accuracy, how well do these samples perform relative to the planned target, communication, schedule slips, questions as to the CAD envelope and other issues. Does the factory have a U.S. office communicating with them during normal hours? Engineering support. A lot of big companies would like to dump the entire project on the factory, and their engineering departments have been hollowed out, and they want to know, you can see in the bottom, magnetics modeling and all these other attributes. They want the factory to be able to do that. So they need design skills in acoustics, understanding of tuning, fluid dynamics, dampening, design skills in transducers, understanding the magnetics and mechanical design, and the ability to accurately predict and model. Well, easier said than done. Operation supports. They'll talk about costs. Costs not necessarily in BOM, but it doesn't mean the lowest bidder either. It's just that the factory understands the cost drivers and communicate these readily. Of course, inexpensive is appealing. Logistics, provide information on their supply chain, vertical integration, inventory management, etc. Again, this is another big outfit, fast-track vendor capabilities. The ability to design the plastics tooling. They want to know they don't want sink marks. They want a high-quality finish. Will the paint stick to the plastics? Understands the cosmetic requirements, mold flow analysis. Do you need hot runners in the tool? Documentation. Good understanding of geometric dimensioning and tolerances. And the continuation, supply chain, rate the relationship the vendor has with their supply chain, multiple single sources for components. The other issue on the supply chain is you look at a guy like Foxconn. It's a huge, enormous outfit. They have enormous control and power over their vendors. They also pay in a year, and a lot of quality vendors won't do business with them. They don't need to. So you have to decide. Some of the vendors will not attract quality subcontractors just because their pricing is unbelievably low and they're very efficient, but they're no fun to deal with. And the guys that can afford to have other customers sometimes just simply won't deal with them. Prototype quality is important. Some of the outfits in the US, they expect the prototype to look like a finished product. And everyone says, hey, it's just a prototype. A lot of outfits won't accept that. Samples received should get the royal treatment. That is samples, let's say, from the US going to China. And they often have subjective demonstrations that the products must be flawless in the early development. So when they show prototypes, it has to look like a show quality product. The ability to ramp up. Day one volume estimates could be 50K a year. Day two estimates could be 50K a week. changes just simply change, and so estimates of what they expect to happen. If you look at a place like Foxlink, which is not Foxconn, but the guy's brother, what they'll do is if they think the product's viable, they'll overbuy on the inventory and hope the customer doesn't change their mind. And so some of their magic ability to ramp up is they invest heavily in their customers' projects. Then the question is, are quality systems in place to track the yields when scaling up production lines and process for test fixture correlation? So not only when you scale up, you need to have the inventory, you need to have the QC managers and the test jigs. Other tricks that the vendor might bring to the table: continuing quality, rank failure analysis capability, and the process for engineering change. All this really means is a big outfit would expect reduced prices each year. As the quantities go up and as time goes by, they always want the price to continually to drop. And part of that comes from better yields, better buying, less QC, getting smarter in production, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, effective sourcing and skilled engineering and development can all go into the toilet. There's some really large outfits where Western buyers and other sourcing decisions can be fickle and at the mercy of upper management. One large loudspeaker company used to send a team that would develop a 20-page survey, and I knew because I used to have to help my Asian clients fill out these survey forms. And then the following year, all this was gone, and this huge speaker company was buying on online auctions all sorts of parts sight unseen. Everything went into the toilet. New management came in, and every place that they qualified, it didn't matter. They just went to the low bidder online. It was amazing. And then, of course, they had a million problems, but that's job security for guys like me. Trust is important. And there's many different aspects when you say, I trust this vendor. Some of it is you go to the vendors and you'll see fake stuff in Asia, and it's just there's a tolerance level there that's very different than here. Fake test systems, fake software, fake materials. But even if you trust the company and the management, it's engineer turnover. How long have the engineers been there? And we'll discuss that in a minute. Purchasing department integrity and questionable customers. If some outfit is building for guys that are buying counterfeit products, you know that the company just doesn't see a problem with counterfeits. Counterfeit test equipment. There's many fake versions of popular Western test systems used in Chinese factories. Using these counterfeit systems is an indication of a lack of Westernization in the management. And for example, what will happen is there's hardware that will run almost everybody's test equipment software in China. And it runs the older versions of the software, but it's anybody that's willing to buy a less expensive, cheap, bent ruler is a scary guy to do business with. And so they'll have 3 or 4 sound checks to show, and then they'll have 300 or 400 IEA counterfeit units. And that mentality is you have to say, how can you trust that vendor to protect your own intellectual property on your product if he's okay with buying counterfeit test equipment? If maybe he's buying fake ferrofluid, maybe he's buying fake Kapton, and it's, well, I get a better price. And then sometimes you check and you can see he paid the same price. The factory paid the same price as the real equipment. But there's some test engineer that got a 50% kickback, and the guy's making 30 grand a year, and he took in $500,000 last year, you know. And so you have to figure out, where is that coming from? Why does this guy that's making 30 grand a year have a $10,000 watch on? Well, Apocal and Uplex are thermoset plastics, thermoset, and those are the real thing. But if you know Kapton JP, It's a thermoplastic. It's meant to be very formable. The Chinese technology for polyimide is thermoplastic. 180C, it starts getting soft. Apical, Uplex, Kapton, Kapton E, those are like 400C. So there's huge differences. When I say fake Kapton, I mean something where it's materially different. Apical and Uplex are just fine. But something that is a cast thermoplastic that its temperature tolerance is half ain't the real thing. I know it's nice in amber, but the price is lower. But the adhesives are handled temperature better than the material. So yes, we're assuming that it's not just a second or third vendor that's just as good or even better. We're talking about something that ain't the real thing. For sure. Doesn't have to be made by DuPont, but it has to perform to the same spec. And if you look at the Chinese alternatives, totally different animal right now. So other issues in trusting a company. You meet the guy, he seems, the management is a top grade person, the engineering management is a top grade person. His engineers are excellent, decent people, but the staff moves on. They're not paying a competitive rate. And what happens is the engineer leaves, and he basically takes your technology with him. In fact, that may be why he's leaving. You bring a really innovative product to China, and some engineer looks at this thing and says, this is really cool, and I understand it, and I understand the vendors, and I understand the product, and I understand how to form it and make it and bond to it, and now I'm going to get a big raise. And he chops this technology to 3 other factories that would die to have this, and he now gets significantly higher salary above what his resume would say, because he's got a neat trick to take to them. And meanwhile, your competitor that's going to this factory has access to this technology, your new designs that are in development, and your product has been leaked out. And the factory manager can't do anything about that in China. I mean, in some cases they can, and people get beaten up, they disappear. I got into trouble for telling one specific story. I had ALMA once, but the point is, there's not much you can do about it. There's one big U.S. company that had an R&D center in Shanghai, and for like 3 years in a row, every new product was launched by a competitor before they launched it. People would be collecting 2 salaries, one from this U.S. outfit in Shanghai and one from some factory, and the designs would be passed on day by day, and a week or 2 before the product launched, the guy would quit and the product would come out somewhere else. In some cases, even with the original company's logo on it. So it's some people move to Malaysia, some people move to the Philippines, but you really want to go to a factory where they pay a premium price to their engineers, where they don't move on. And I usually say, let me see your list of engineers and let me see how long they've been there. When I visit, I'm going to talk to them. And if you find that most of the guys, every time I come back every 3 or 4 months, there's a different crowd of engineers, you know that there's no integrity in your information and that it's going to simply move on. And this is why they make Tums. Another issue is getting your tooling back. If a customer is unhappy with the factory, are there issues getting the tooling returned? And sometimes they can say, look, we subsidized the tooling, we don't want to give the tooling back, and we won't use it, but we're not going to give it to you. Then at least you can hope to get it back all chopped up. But the last thing you want is you move on to have them banging out your product and your tooling. So the tooling room should be top secret. It's not unusual to see a big garage door open in the tooling room, and this is not a good idea. The tooling room is where your future products are being readied for before production, who has access to the tooling room, and can other workers look inside. I know of a headset project for a video game where they needed 25 million pieces, and one perfectly good factory was rejected because on that day the tooling door was open, and the assumption was anybody could walk by. Years later, I went back there, I told the owner of the factory, and he showed me there is an area back there that nobody could get to, but one glance to see the tooling room garage door open, and this outfit that makes video games simply went elsewhere. Main thing also, if you're giving a tour of the tooling room when they're trying to show you how many CNC machines have, can you see other guys' products there? That's going to happen to your products. So the supply chain is changing, and change is here to stay. We can discuss the collapse of the supply chain. And 10 or 15 years ago, the OEM ODM factory might have been in Taiwan, Korea, Malaysia. Typically, they were dealt with a trading company. Maybe there was a Japanese parent company. Maybe there was a Japanese U.S. subsidiary. Then from the U.S. brand, there would be independent sales reps who might make 2 to 6%. And then there was the dealer who hopefully is trying to make 40%. And then the end user bought it. And so there was so many people that stepped on things. And so the value proposition of buying audio or a TV 15 years ago, you didn't get the same deal. It's a much better pricing now. But at the expense that there's a whole bunch of people missing. The factory, typically in China, has a trade department. They don't even go through Hong Kong. Sometimes there's a trading company. And then there's the brand in the U.S., and then there's a dealer, or it's sold online, and then there's the end user. But consider something like Walmart or Insignia brand, which is really part of Best Buy. There's a buying office in China for the retail store chain, and it goes directly from the China factory into Walmart or Best Buy or whatever. And even if you see something now like Sanyo and Best Buy, they rent that brand from Sanyo and they buy direct, and they simply pay a small couple of points to Sanyo, who never even reviews the product. And so you can look at from the China factory to the house brand like Insignia and Best Buy, and it's just straight off the boat. And then the question is this really as good? And when you look at the tooling of, let's say, Insignia TV, you can see the unbelievable plastic tooling where it's just so rippled because whoever designed the tooling had no idea what they're doing. That's something normally a trading company or a parent company would have taken care of. So you're getting, in some cases, a much cheaper product, and the retail price is much cheaper. And what a middle-class family in the U.S. can do by buying at Walmart is very impressive for the prices you pay, but the product quality and sometimes the engineering sophistication got lost in the wash. The baby's lost in the wash. So then you have to look at the trading company, and I'm not a trading company, but what I've seen is as the trading companies disappear, certain problems happen. And say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a big push of we don't have to buy through Taiwan to do business in China. We don't have to buy through Hong Kong. Let's get rid of all the trading companies. But a lot of people, in hindsight, realized these guys actually worked for their money. So is a trading company an unsung hero, or is it a parasite? The normal assumption is, hey, I don't want a parasite, living off of my projects. But they function as a factory liaison. They keep the factory honest. When a factory screws up, one question is, do I just stiff the customer or do I make good on this? If it's bought through a trading company, the trading company may represent a half a dozen different customers, and he applies the pressure. You screw the small guy, and you're going to scare me, and I'm going to move my business to another factory. So there's some clout that a trading company sometimes brings in. It lets the engineers engineer rather than travel on planes. More projects get done with the trading company. A lot of guys dumped all the trading companies, and they found out the same engineering department did 30% less work. Engineers still have to travel to the factory for product development, but not as often. when you're using a good trading company. And the trading companies can be of value, but today profit margins are so tight that often the luxury of a trading company is not an option. If you're using a trading company and they're making 5%, Costco sells flat screen TVs at a 6% markup. So things are very thin these days. So now let's look at product development from a clean sheet to off the shelf. Clean sheet design, high risk, long commitment, tooling, staffing, but if it's successful, you can get a lot of your brand DNA into the product. The other approach, and my firm does both, is you go to Asia, they say go to Asia with a garbage bag. We want to add headphones to our product line. We want to add some accessories to our product line. There's almost no budget. The next trade show they want to launch it at is 4 months away. The joke is you put lipstick on a pig, or at Monster we would say we'd monsterize it. And the ODM design and the tooling is already done. The product would have to be functional, successful, working. We would have very limited non-reoccurring engineering budget, very limited tooling changes. Just you get the most tacky parts of the product off and something about your brand identity on, even if it's just the logo, some feature or function, packaging. Meanwhile, the results of the development work is known. There's no surprises. You want to pick something that's already viable and successful. The time frame is short, typically less than 6 months. The last 20% would be graphics, packaging, logo, your company colors. And it's great to fill out your product line with very limited brand DNA. So you look at an outfit like Blue Ant Wireless. They have 3 or 4 really innovative products, waterproof, weatherproof, very sophisticated signal processing for wind noise if you're walking down a windy street, the wind screens, there's 2 layers, there's advanced signal processing. Meanwhile, each of those projects took 18 months, they cost over $1 million, but there's room for 2 times as many products that are just good earphones and headphones that are just decent, and you just make sure you get the same colors, the same packaging, and the product quality is decent. Maybe you switch out the driver or the mic, add something really minor. And that's sort of the off-the-shelf ODM solution to fill out a product line. It's known as Hamburger Helper. Okay, so let's have an example of a lipstick on a pig earphone. You'd start with a tooled earphone that has acceptable sound and general quality. You might upgrade the cable by using a aramid fiber. The flex life might go from 10,000 to 50,000, and you won't get anything back with bad cables. You would upgrade the ear tip. There's guys in China that just specialize in quality ear tips instead of the default that they would include. Maybe it's a double shot of silicone over TPE and it stays in and it's a ear stabilizer. And then maybe instead of having color in the plastic, it would get painted, maybe make sure with a primer so the paint doesn't come off, and then you get the packaging together. This is a 3-month project. No tooling, no room for errors, everything goes smoothly, everybody's a hero, and the customer's expectation is a good earphone that doesn't fall apart, he's happy with it, and you don't damage your brand. Industrial design impact on engineering development programs. A lot of the times, a company like mine will work with an industrial design house. Sometimes they really make the product successful, sometimes they kill the product. Often, industrial design ID is king, and you have to go get the napkin designs versus engineering limits. There's never enough back volume for speakers. Marketing and management sensibilities and perception often require compliance with fixed ID. So they'll take a product where we could say we could do the smartphone and we could get Polycom sound quality on the speakerphone, and I need 5 millimeters deep for the speaker. And they come back and they said everyone else is using 3 millimeters. I said, that's right. And 5 millimeters would give us more than double the excursion for the same size speaker. And the phone is 10 millimeters. And the answer is no, We have other things going on. Our industrial design says 3 millimeters. Well, that means I can't go below 600 hertz. It means I can't play loud enough without the thing running out of excursion, and you end up with excessive signal processing that knocks off the bass at higher levels. Industrial design was king, but the product in the end may not be so successful. So often, ID can win the battle but lose the war. And this is just a fact of life. And good management has to decide who controls the project, what will be most successful. I also work with some industrial design houses where they look at all this and they say, I got to have a week. There's got to be a way to do this. There's got to be a way to make the product look better and get what you want. But a lot of guys just simply say, I'm the diva, I'm the industrial designer, this is the way it goes. And it's amazing in which companies, the most successful ones often will not compromise it. Well, I think those were the headlines in one big breath. Oh, thank you very much for coming. Oh, yes, go ahead.
What do you feel about expats as being engineers on staff?
Well, I mean, two things going on. Often the guys are out there because they can't get along, a drinking problem, personality problem. Or sometimes it's a good engineer and he likes having 14 girlfriends and you know, and even not just expats, but like Taiwanese in China, they say there's one country, two systems, two wives. So there's different reasons why people permanently move out of their country, and you just have to case by case judge it. In the end, if the product's going to be sold in Europe or the U.S., you want somebody with Western eyes, and you can get that. It can be a banana, that's somebody brought up here. It's Asian, but they resonate. Maybe they went to college in Vancouver, and they can look at the products and they see the same thing I see. And so you have to judge somebody born in the U.S. that's Caucasian, that's got personality problems, and he's out there, or the guy's out there and he's busy getting rich, and he's part of the whole kickback mechanism. You have to be some concern over that. So you always have to judge who's out there and what have they done and what are they in touch with, and do I have to go out there and double check their work, or do they do it better than me? It's just yes.
Continuing on that theme, but looking out maybe over 2 or 3 years, do you see the westernization and the conflict situation getting better, worse, or about the same?
I think it's going to get better because I work with a lot of Asian outfits that do R&D and invest in development and industrial design, and they cry the loudest when their stuff's ripped off. And so it's, when the shoe's on the other foot, that's really very effective. And the reaction's the same. So I think it's a transition, but it's also very powerful to hire an engineer that brings to your company something really interesting. And that happens here. I do expert witness work, and there's outfits I work with that chase after their ex-employees because the question is, you have a right to work. And when you hire an engineer, you have a full expectation that he knows what he's doing, which means he learned it somewhere else. And when he leaves you, he's going to take what he learned, and that's going to be his craft when he goes to the next place. And China's going to be about the same. I guess the question is how discreet and how much is revealed. And, each time I do a project, I leave a little bit smarter. Then the question is, a specific case is an outfit that makes conferencing systems, and they're in Salt Lake City, and some guy leaves, and there's some communications where he gives the exact price and quantities that the other guys bought from. Well, he should have just said, well, our pricing is too high or too low for those sort of quantities. I know that from past experience without specifically saying what the other guys paid or where they bought it from or how many they bought or the exact price. So there's a balance between using your knowledge and experience and discretion and industrial espionage. And you also see in China where the entire engineering department leaves and goes somewhere else. So, and so what they do is instead of one guy leaving, the chief engineer brokers a deal where the entire team, or it could be the purchasing department, and the entire team leaves, goes somewhere else, and the other company basically has picked up all the knowledge of the other company and damaged their most fearsome competitor by taking a piston out of it. And so, I think things will evolve, and some things will get much better, and some things will get worse. China's too big a country to be playing the games that it's doing now, where you go into a department store and you can get a $20,000 software program for $3, or your test equipment, and you look at these outfits, and Apple was very aggressive in selecting vendors that didn't have counterfeits, that had real test equipment.
Some of the problems I've seen is that engineers will leave for pennies. And they do this 3 or 4 times in a period of 3 years, then they end up doubling or tripling their salary. So they eventually end up, whoring themselves for just a little bit of money.
So I would disagree. I'd say today they're really high-class choral girls, and they're whoring themselves for a lot of money. So 3 or 4 years ago that was true, but things are to a higher standard today.
But eventually, what you end up having is a hyperbolized title. So you take the title divided by 2, divided by 3, and that's really your capability back to the Western system.
It really depends on the category. For a hot area like headphones, the turnover is just unbelievable. And I'll go to some factory, and I know everybody there, and I go, wait a minute, they're at the wrong factory. And you'll see this in Bluetooth, and you'll see this in purchasing, where there's not enough guys to go around. And you'll see the whole crew. Wait a minute, you guys are all at Primax. Now you're at Foxlink. Yeah. Boom, one morning. So. Yeah.
Since all the costs of labor is going up in China, what do you think about places like Vietnam?
Well, I mean, that's a whole long story, but I'd have to say that, the whole supply chain and infrastructure is in China, and it probably makes sense to build things even back here, but we don't have the subcontractors, the engineers have retired. We no longer have the infrastructure, and it's going to take some years for that to build. Vietnam is a tiny country, and Indonesia is not a big country, and Malaysia is not a big country, and the Philippines are not a big country. And yes, they're going to definitely get some of the business out of China, but the development time and the infrastructure is such that I think China is certainly going to enjoy a lot of the business, even though it's not so price competitive anymore. And the expectation of workers and engineers is huge, increases every year. And I saw that happen in Korea in the late 80s, and exports just stopped short. But then China was developing, everything just flew into China. I don't think we have those options. I don't see India as a viable source, and that's a whole long story. But I think we're going to be stuck going to China for a long time. And here we are. Yes.
Just quickly, when you begin a project, do you try to inject project management either via software amongst all the teams that are involved in it, or how do you manage the actual flow of the project?
I don't. I generally plug in. Each place is using Microsoft Project Manager or some other system, and they have a way of doing it, and I usually plug into that. If not, we use our own project management. And the path is, for me, so familiar. You're doing 6 projects at any one time, try that for 30 years. And so we just go through all the steps. And then our biggest problem is when the client doesn't want to use that and they want some suicide solution, that's very tough. And just one, it's a $4 billion a year outfit that we do work with in the past, and they had just come up with some product. It was terrible. They paid too much for it. They were dumping them out, the headphone out through the Sprint stores. It looked like a piece of Tupperware, yet they were paying a premium price. And it's because they eliminated the EVT. They eliminated all these steps in the process. And they said, we must have the product in this time frame. I said, why do you do it so short? Your last product failed. It was embarrassing. Now you want me to repeat exactly the same process. Why do you need it? There's no trade show at that time to launch at. It's nothing to do with it. It's stock price. We all work here. We all get all the bad news at this moment, and that's when we buy the stock in our company. And then we make sure all the good news appears over there, and that's when we sell our stock, and then we all leave together before the SEC catches us, and we have our money. It was nothing to do with product development, nothing to do with the success of the product, nothing to do with doing their job. And from the very top, this crap came all the way down. And they hired me as a joke to make it look like they were going to do something with it. Meanwhile, I took them to all the factories and I did my job. And I had factories call me and said, they want 30% kickback. Just so you know, the price quotes we gave you go out the window. And by the way, don't fight it. You'll end up dead. Just take the money and get out of here and don't continue with this anymore. It's very dangerous for you. This was last year. Big public U.S. company, Anyway, so there's certain times when you get in the way in the supply chain where there's tens of millions of dollars being kicked back. And if you're working for a company like that, you either get with the program or you get out. Me, I get out. It's too dangerous. Thank you for coming. Oh.
I have one final question. What is your strategy when you're working with an OEM and they don't allow you to see their sub-suppliers?
That doesn't happen for me.
What's your strategy to say no?
I represent a lot of business. I get to see everything.
So if it was to happen,
I tell them it's unacceptable. And then I name their 4 most feared competitors. And I said, we'll be joking about this at dinner, having some scotch, laughing about you. No, it hasn't happened in 20 years. And that's job security for me. You can't see it. I can't let you show the process. You can't see the factory. I said, good, that's fine, because I already have some good vendors. And I just, every time in a project, you got to throw the guys off in the bottom and the top, and you just volunteered.
I haven't had that.
Anyways, so it's like a trading company advantage. I'm not the trading company. I don't make a markup. I don't make a percentage, but I represent a lot of business. And they all know who I've represented in the past. I usually tend to get the same, it's like bad clams, they keep coming back, and I get new guys in the future. And that's the deal. The other end of it is, I work with a number of the materials vendors, and I know where the materials are going. So I can find out about the supply chain. It was an example. I gave a talk at ICEAT, which is like ALMA in China, and I said, we know who's using all the counterfeit test equipment. And one guy who was a plant in the audience got up and said, how would you know? 2 minutes. He said, how would you know? I said, if I wanted to find out about Ford, I wouldn't go to Ford, I'd go to Chrysler. When I want to find out about Chrysler, I go to General Motors. Don't you think everybody blabs to badmouth the other guy? All I need to do is ask the competitors and talk to the engineers that have left your place. I know everything. And everyone started to laugh, and that's just the way it is in China. Everyone has gossip to trade. That's what everybody wants, is gossip. And the Chinese and the Taiwanese vendors of the materials, they want the gossip on the U.S. guys. So we sit there and we trade. Yes.
Garrett, how important is it to be able to speak Chinese?
That's usually useful, but I work with the material supply trading company that doesn't do products. They represent DuPont and Teijin and Exxon, and they come with me. And the guy got his engineering degree in Shanghai, and he's a Hong Kong guy. And just the fact that he's sitting there means that whatever they say is going to be passed. My English is good. I speak English well, but over there my English is good. So I find out anyway. Thank you for coming.